Sister, do you think you know who you are? Do you think you know what you can do? I'm telling you, you don't know a thing about yourself as long as you think you're limited. Why am I telling you? Why am I so fierce at this moment? I'm telling you, I did think I knew who I am. All the time I would be mild and gentle and peaceful and a humble being, and it's perfect to be like this. You know what I mean? It is perfect to be all this. And I tell you, I still am. But there's the other part of me, of you, of anybody, of us. Whatever you are practicing all the time, all the years of your life, what you think you're good at, what you should improve, and what you should be perfect in, because you're born with it. I'm telling you, there's much more in each of you. In my case, this you feel, you hear now, this fierce energy, this fire, and this pressure. Well, it's so much pressure because I've held it back all my life. What the hell did I do? I'm exploding, my goodness. You see, maybe it's not your part to learn this one, but I'm telling you, don't rely on that what you think you are. Don't rely on that what people are mirroring you. I'm telling you what you shall do or be. Just find out, just do it. Go on, try yourself, make mistakes, fall and fall and fall again, and get up again. You cannot fail, you cannot do anything wrong. Just do it. Get back your natural energy. Get back your natural being, your whole natural being. No matter if you're young or old, if you're a man or a woman, no matter which country you've been raised, no matter whatever people told you you are, no matter whatever ever you thought you will be, just be serious with yourself. Just be honest with yourself. Feel all the little things that want to come up in you and want to be expressed and lived and felt. Just go. Live it. Be it.
How's it going, everybody? That was my friend Ulrike Kuseke from Germany, and that was a improvisational soul speak she did, freestyle, and then I put some music to it. Thank you, Ulrike. We got another great show, the second show of the day. We got Charan coming on. She was incredible the last time, so let me pull her up and get her on here so we can have a discussion in the spirit of expansion.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing? It's good to see you again. Thank you for coming back on.
Thank
What's
you
been happening?
Oh, brilliant. Oh my God. Amazing stuff's happening.
Hey, isn't it? You know, I'm so, I have no choice but just to be in this present moment. I can barely remember the bulk of the information from the last time we talked, but I know you have a very unique perspective. And I know you've been studying, I think it was in a lab for quite a long time. And I think it has to do with DNA. And I also want to say, because I'll forget, that I did put a free offer in the body of the announcement, and I'll add it to the body of the live that you are offering to the folks that are listening to this live and on the replay. So thank you for honoring us with your presence again, sharing space with us. What's going on in your end of the world? What's going on the front line of the apocalypse?
I can't agree with you even more than what you just said, because, you know, when you said about being in the present moment, it's like, it feels like everything's just falling away. That's no longer required. And it's not actually by doing anything or doing any work on it or any of that. It just feels like things are just, as the presence of our beings are coming forward, the rest of it just is just, it's like debris that's just kind of disappearing, dissipating.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I want to get into what you do, so we can go back to that in a minute. But I love what you just said to open this up. And you said something that you don't hear a lot of. You said you don't even have to do anything. It's happening, you know? And so as somebody who I would consider has a scientific mind, you know, a lot like Morgan, you know, it's almost like technical, but not to take away the spiritual part of it. For you to say that is very interesting. So my question to you is, can we lighten up a little bit? Do we need to be digging in the shadows? Do we need to be on our toes all the time, you know, trying to keep our balance? Or do we need to spend our time getting used to the new earth and the new way of being in our true nature?
I believe, and I feel from my own experience going through these last few months as well, is that we are just asked to be present, because it's happening. It's happening. And every moment, the only thing we need to do is, like I said, be present. And I think if we go searching, deep digging into the, you know, the well to find out what's going on, we're going to miss the light. Like we're going deep down where, you know, that may have been the case in the past, and I did it, you know, we all did it. But right now it just feels like we need to just be present. And I think one of the things, you know, alongside with what I do, you know, which is to align people to their DNA, the truth, their being, so that the DNA can align to that. And I think the difficulty where people may be getting a bit jarred is where I feel personally is that the nervous system is starting to get accustomed to this new. And in that, there is this sort of in-between place where people are in the old and also the new, like one foot in the other and the other. And it feels like the nervous system gets sort of into that fear or, you know, any of that, which is the old. And people just need to remind themselves to just come back to just breathing, nursing, and we'll do some of all of that. But when you do that, the nervous system calms down and it can open up to that new.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. And it's so funny because when I do these shows and I start to recall things that happened in the last 24 hours or whatever that I hadn't thought about, or, you know, the conscious mind hadn't been alerted to. So what you're describing, you know, I guess figuratively and literally kind of happened to me last night as a micro incident. And this is the kind of stuff that intrigues me, because I'm with you. There's something we're missing by not being present, but also at the same time, there's this force, this reality that's coming, whether you'd like it or not, no matter what you do. But last night, when we go to bed, we hold hands and then we connect. She usually keeps her eyes closed. I keep mine open. And I've noticed a lot of activity the last 2 or 3 nights. And I'm like, okay, is this me I'm looking at, or is this something else? And last night I was laying there and there is a full moon, but it was on the other side of the house. And there was this light that just kept coming in through the window. And I thought it was a car, but we're out in the country. There's no cars out here. And it was 2:30 in the morning. So the one road that's out here, there might be one car, but there's certainly not going to be 2 or 3. It's only like 600 people live over here. But anyway, what happened was, as I started to allow it and not resist it, and I thought, oh, that's interesting, and not stare right at it and just keep my eyes straight forward, I started to see, which is an uncommon energy. And some of it had shape and form and silhouette, and they weren't, I would say, earthly, at least, in the physical sense. And the dialogue went like this. And I think this is where I'm trying to get to with what you're saying. It was like, oh my God, that doesn't look too, that's kind of weird looking, or, it wasn't hideous. It wasn't evil, or I wasn't scared, but I was like, I'm in this place. Is that me, or is that something else? And I just kept hearing, which I've heard before, just allow. Do you trust the universe? Do you trust you? Would you put anything in front of you that, you know what I mean? And so I just started, just to basically merge the energy, integrate the energy. And this is where I'm at with it, with what you said. Do we need to do, what do we need to do? Is there anything that would be, more present than to be where we're at and accept where we're at and everything is good, so to speak? Or do we need to do some mechanical stuff?
I think it depends on where people are at, to be honest. Some people can be present just in the moment with whatever's going on. But some need some mechanical stuff. And I feel that it may be just to notice the breath. And, in the free gift that I've given to everyone, basically I take them and I'll lead them through a process, which is less than 2 minutes, of just noticing the breath and getting to the place where they can be present. And it can instantly change your physiology. You can change, and we can do it here as well later, but it just changes the whole physiology and the whole point of getting present. Or if we're talking about, being in that deep well in the darkness, and I don't mean dark and light and bad or good. I just mean in the emotional sense where you feel like you're really struggling. It can be that you either you just, as you're in there, you become aware of it and you shift through it. And one of the main things I would say is that no matter what anybody's going through, the key thing is to feel through it, because it's the feeling. And mostly we've been taught, or we resist feeling because it's painful. And I think that if people can just get that can shift so much, and it can shift, because what happens is that you're actually, as soon as you allow yourself to feel, it moves you through that whole process. And one of the things that I've had in the last month, as I've gone through my own stuff, is to feel like, I feel that anything that we're feeling is a resistance of death. That was my feeling of it. And so when I was going through stuff, what I did was I said, okay, I embrace death. I embrace, and that's not physical death. I mean, of everything that I'm feeling, I embrace it, because there was a fear of not embracing it. And so as soon as I embraced it, that's when it dissipated.
Yeah. And it's like that covers loss, lack, limitation, and all that stuff. So scarcity. And it's like, what you said about the feeling thing. I heard people start talking about this a few months ago, and then I started to experience it, because, you can hear stuff and it doesn't matter. You still got to experience it. And that was along those lines, about feeling, and feeling not necessarily that didn't have emotion, but not the egoic emotion over here, like the disempowered emotion. It was almost like empowering emotion. And so, like, I even had had it happen to me a couple of days ago, and something came at me in the form of a person or whatever. I forget what it was. And I know now, like so many of us, it's never them, it's always me. This is about me. So I took it in and I thought, okay, this is bothering me. And I laid down and I'm like, all right, um, okay, this is how I feel. And I'm going to feel that. And I did. And I just said, okay, I'm upset about this. You know, I don't like that, but it's not about that person. So I don't know, something happened. And like you said, it dissipated from that point.
Mm-hmm. And that's where we get to that place where the nervous system recalibrates. You know, our DNA then recalibrates to that pure essence of our being. And I think this is what's happening right now, is that we're all calibrating to that. And the more that we
Yeah.
can just continue to do this process, the more we'll calibrate our DNA to that.
And that's a great word for it, calibration. You know, the last guest was talking about it. We've experienced it a couple times this past week when we lay down. And that is literally the physical body calibrating. Like you can feel the electricity in your body. You know, your muscles might spasm. You know, that's happened. And it's like, it's all connecting, it's all converging, you know, like the physical and the non-physical. It's actually starting to take on a physicality. And as people have predicted or talked about or channeled, we're transforming, you know, biologically to a light body, so to speak. But yeah, and so like I found too that, and I don't know where you're at with this, because I want to talk about how do you align the DNA, or how do you have the DNA become aligned with you? How does that become all the same channel? But it's like, can you approach it like one topic at a time? Can you do it general alignments? In other words, can you say, you know what, I want to heal this, or I want to fix this, or I want to align with this success energy field, or whatever the case is? Or you know, in general, can we blast ourselves? Can we do a comprehensive alignment that moves us quicker?
I think it depends on what's going on in the moment. And it's always in the moment. And I feel that we can do all of it. We can do one at a time, whatever feels good in the moment. There's no right or wrong with it. But there's two things that come to mind. One is that if we are experiencing something that's okay, so let me give you an example. So just before the call, I found out something about one of my relatives, family members, and I was just kind of I was in this space of, you know, just beingness with presence, and suddenly this news just comes in, and then I notice now how my body works is that I don't go into the head with the thoughts about what can happen, because that's what we would do normally. But it feels like this wave just comes through me, and then I just experience the wave and continue to feel the wave. And what's happening with the DNA, to answer your question, is that when I was in that moment of just feeling and being, it was the DNA then is calibrated already to that pure essence, your divinity. And as soon as, okay, say a wave comes in and we start judging it, or we start judging the situation, or going into the fearful thoughts about the future, we could then be experiencing, it's almost like a short circuit, you know, it jars. And so instead, if we just allow that wave to move through, then the DNA will continue to vibrate at the frequency of your true essence. And so you're always calibrating no matter what's coming at you. Wow. And the other thing I was going to say was, because you were talking about abundance, and if somebody wants to you know, amp up the abundance factor, one of the things is that we've got to recognize abundance is that feeling. Like if we look at a child playing and they're just in joy, that is abundance. It's that energy that's flowing through them. And if we can get connected to that, which is by getting present, noticing what we're doing, feeling in every moment, it's like we can just amp that up. And that is what is abundance. And that can then be reflected back to us by either money or other situations, jobs, whatever it is. And it's, you know, so we have, it's almost like we are the equipment of divinity. The DNA is the equipment of
Yes.
divinity.
Yes.
And so we use this process, we become calibrated to that divinity to allow for all these things to then surface in our life.
Yeah. Yeah. I got into this discussion a couple of days ago with a gentleman. I can't remember who it is as usual, but he had the scientific mind going. He had some really good explanations with it. And I was like, okay, is the DNA physical or is it non-physical? And like, this is just me talking inside my head. I did ask him that question. I don't remember what he said. For me, it's like, it's both. It's like there's some type of, it's almost like the space between, say, conscious thought and intuition. Like there's a space in between, you know, like, and maybe it's 0 point. I don't know. Now you talk about the like you were talking about the wave and allowing it and feeling it. One of the things I noticed, and I've heard other people talk about it, is that, you know, we had these feelings like you talked about. You like, hey, that was a good example. Feelings where you're allowed to go into your head versus feel. That's two different types of feelings. But what I was going to get at was that, as people have said, as they are more in tune with that feeling through the heart, you know, not through the mind, that they become less emotional in the sense of like over emotional, like almost like I've heard several people say, God, I wonder what's wrong with me. You know, everybody's over here getting upset and crying and sad about this situation. And I almost feel indifferent to it. Is that part of our evolution? Is there a part of our human emotional system that's just not going to stay with us?
I have noticed that myself. I don't know if you've noticed it yourself too, but it's like, it's not that you're not compassionate. In fact, there's more compassion and
Yes.
to situations outside. But I think the transition has been to move from being empathic and taking it on to being compassionate and becoming the frequency of this divinity. Because as you become the frequency of that divinity, then you're already transforming what you're observing outside.
That's right. That's quantum. That's quantum right there. That's the only thing I ever, you know, I don't read a lot and stuff like that, but, you know, people start talking about quantum. And then I heard somebody say quantum is the observer, not just seeing, but based on what they do with that impression. So the energy that's exuded from that observer is actually what's creating it. And I think that's really just what you said, which is very powerful. And if I think about my own situation, my own experience in evolution, now Morgan and I have been together unseparated now for a few months. So that's a very interesting, you know, way to go through this. But I noticed that with the way she is with me and even the way I'm with her sometimes, which is that whatever's going on over here, the other one can hold this space that you're describing, and everything changes. You know what I mean? And there's fewer conversations. There's less misunderstandings because the energy doesn't lie, basically. Now, in environments like that, is that an example of just like aligning with that environment or holding your space or whatever you want to call it? Is that an example? Does DNA align in moments like that? Is it aligning with our divinity, or at least moving in that trajectory?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No doubt. I mean, the minute we just feel and step into that beingness, our DNA is already tuned to. Okay, so imagine that we have, and everyone listening can feel this. If they have, like, they just close their eyes and feel into their body as to where the source of their being is, and everybody will feel it in a different place. And as you feel it, for me, it's in my solar plexus. I can feel it right away.
Me too.
And it once you're in touch with that, and when something, like I said, a wave of some, you know, emotions came my way, I came with it. And so my observations are with that area of my solar plexus, knowing it feels like a pulse of light. And I can just be with that as the emotions are going through me. And as we're doing that in every moment, our DNA is always going to be calibrating with the way that we are feeling, the way that we are observing ourselves. So the thing is, we are a frequency machine, and DNA is always listening. It's responding to the frequency. So when I said earlier about if we feel with our heads rather than feeling with our hearts and feeling through it, what's happening is that we begin to have thoughts about the situation, and the thoughts about the situation have a certain frequency. So there may be about a fearful thought about the future as a result of what's going on. And as we're feeling that, the vibration of that becomes different to what we feel in our being, in our soul. And so when there's those two contrasts, so our job really, from where we began this conversation about, getting present, is that when we're having those thoughts, to just drop back into where you feel it. Where's your soul spot? And as you do that, then the frequency is going to constantly just keep, moving. And what happens, you were saying about the DNA being physical and non-physical. It's both. It really is both. And so this is why it's responding to that. In fact, just as a side note, DNA is like a wormhole. It can basically transport us to, different dimensions and all sorts. But the point is, it's not about wanting to get to those dimensions. It's more about just getting into that space, because in that space of our soul, we're accessing the whole.
Yeah, I like that. I try to put things in like simple rules of the road, but while I was listening to you and you were talking about that, as it drops, and you can see the disconnect or the imbalance between the mind and the heart. And I thought to myself, well, I wonder if in human terms, for us to understand it better, for me, when it's coming through the heart, or really actually through where you feel your soul, right? Like I'm in the same as you, the solar, right? And that your mind actually aligns with it. In other words, if I say I want to connect to my DNA and whatever the situation is, or I want to align with it, to me, it's like what you've explained. It's like we're coming from our soul essence, or coming from our heart essence, instead of trying to come from our mind, which, like if you look at meditation, they remove the mind. But to me, that the mind's part of it. It's almost like it has to align as well. Maybe that's the Trinity, the mind, body, DNA, the new Trinity, instead of the mind, body, spirit.
Yeah.
And so now and just so everybody knows that didn't catch you before, you've had a history with working with DNA in, let's call it the 3D as well, right? Weren't you in a lab? And can you tell us a little bit about that, just so people will know if they haven't caught the story before?
Well, I was working I did my master's in human genetics, and then I went and worked in the laboratory for 13 years, working with DNA. I used to extract the DNA from the cells and look at the string of letters, so to speak, that the DNA is made up of, and basically look to see what was different in those letters that was creating certain blood disorders in children in the hospital that I was working at. And so my job was really to do that, so that the consultants could do the work and, prescribe the right medication and all of that. So once I did that, I my truth, my being was always searching, looking for something else, because I still knew I wasn't helping people that way. And so that's when I found out about epigenetics from Bruce Lipton. That's where everything just became full circle, and this is what I'm doing right now. And I help people create miracles from the DNA out. So that's
fascinating. I'm curious. So, I mean, because I've never even pictured that, but I guess that's where they'd get the images and stuff from, is you can actually see the DNA under a microscope. You can actually see the formation of it and so on. And I wonder, like with the kind of work you're doing now, have you ever done a before and after on yourself for a patient? Like take a look at their DNA and then go through some energetic transformations and that type of thing, or whatever you want to call it, and then taking a sample again. That would be interesting.
That would be interesting, and I haven't got any facilities or to look at that in a laboratory or anything like that. But what I do know is that research has been done in Russia. His name is Peter Gorev. He's a Russian scientist. He does what's called wave genetics, and we were talking about frequencies and how we go from here to here, and we become that frequency machine. Now he has what you call a frequency device, basically, that can extract frequency of things, living things. And he can then create that into an MP3, and then people can listen to that and then, have their DNA shift. Now, what he did, I don't know if I mentioned it the last time, but he took salamander eggs and frog eggs, and he took the frequency of these salamander eggs with his device, and he played it, converted it to an MP3 and played it to the frog eggs. And when the frog eggs hatched, they were salamanders.
Oh, wow.
So, and so the other thing that he did was he had a patient that had a genetic disorder, and she was, I think, 5 years old, and she was going to die. Her prognosis was that she was going to die. So he took the frequency of her cousin, who was normal, and he converted it into an MP3, gave it to the mom. Mom played it to the child, and she was then normal. Now, he did look at her DNA, and what he found was that the DNA didn't change. And this is why you were saying about the physical and the non-physical, right? With the DNA, the DNA didn't change. It's basically when we say that we're a frequency machine, we're a frequency, we emit frequencies. When we can do what we were talking about, when we come down to the soul, we feel what we feel. We don't need a machine to develop an MP3 and all of that. When we do this, we become the technology ourselves to be able to shift the way that our DNA is listening to the divinity. It's listening to the frequency of our divinity. And as soon as it does that, it's going to align. It's going to come to health. It's going to come to abundance. It's just the way it is.
I think that's a great explanation. I think that we get caught up in the words period, but spiritual or spirituality or religion, and it's a very non-scientific connotation. But there is a spirit science, and it's somewhere in the middle, because if you look at the explanation that you so thoroughly just gave, there's almost where's the spirit other than the word divinity? But it truly is in the meeting in the middle. That's a fascinating story, really. And I wonder too if a lot of people talk about how energetically things change in that moment, okay, and that it takes a little while to show up in the physical, be it something in your body. But I would imagine, like in the case of that 5-year-old girl, there had to be physical ramifications that are consequences that came from this development of her listening to the healthy frequency. So I wonder how that works. I mean, who knows? Maybe the DNA never changes in the physicality, and maybe it takes 10 years. I don't know how that works.
Well, he showed that the DNA doesn't change. It's the expression of the DNA that changes, because
the expression
changes. Yeah. So we have a certain amount of genes in our DNA. So genes is like basically there's a portion of the DNA that's like a sentence, and the sentence, the old thinking, which is genetics, was that it can be read one way, and so one gene equals one protein. But what they found was that actually it's one gene can equal about 30,000 proteins. It just depends on the frequency of what the DNA is, the environment. And that's what epigenetics is about. It's like, what is the environment that's in the DNA? And so it's not just when we're doing this work, we're feeling into it, that you're shifting just things for yourself. what you may be feeling is maybe because of what your ancestors went through, or there's a trauma that they experienced. And the good thing about what, we said earlier, we don't have to go digging to find what it was or why or whatever. But as soon as we do this, we are allowing ourselves, our DNA, to realign with the place of that divinity, that spirit. And as it does that, the ancestral stuff or anything, our own belief systems, all just fall away, because it's the frequency match. So as soon as we match the frequency to the higher vibration, it's going to shift.
Yeah, it's almost like from hearing your explanation, it's almost like being consciously being aware of our true center of gravity within ourselves, which, I'm saying that metaphorically and not, that, where's my soul? So like if what you just described and something comes over me, which is, technically not even mine, but it's ancestral or whatever, or let's say I walk into a house or a room, and we've all done that. And like, oh, what's that? In both situations, by one modality or another, but being conscious and aligning with that essence that's you. That's what you're basically saying. Like you're taking the thinking out of it and just go back to that space and the breath, and you're on automatic. You're maintaining it or aligning it and balancing it out.
Yeah. It's like a frequency modulator, you become one of those. It's like you are modulating constantly with that inner divinity. And no matter what comes your way, it's like the wave may come, but it's like a pendulum, it'll swing and then it'll come back to balance again. It's like, this is who we are. This is what we, we're, I love it because we're really such a great, piece of hardware, that the software that we can then sort of control in this way as to how it sort of it comes through us.
There seems to be like a rhythm, or a space or a consciousness, or it's almost like being in a multi-dimensional video game. Like what you're saying is, it's like you find this rhythm and you stay with it, and then and I think that's what I'm experiencing, what I'm observing in others. It's like, hey, I can't even think about tomorrow. I mean, I'm here right now. The circumstances I'm in, we're starting to look at them all as the same thing, like consequences and circumstances. This is just where I'm at right now. And I don't know, it's like when you said that thing about the DNA and what type of signal it's giving out. I mean, I think of the term dormant DNA, and I don't know what it means, but to me, I can see it with what you're saying, that from one identical DNA to another, you could have two totally different frequencies coming out of there based on the environment. And that's what you're saying epigenetics is.
Yeah, I mean, they've done twin studies where they've looked at that and looked to see like what, if they're both the same DNA, but, say in their later years, they are both looking completely different and have different, one's overweight, one's maybe thinner, one's got a particular disease, the other hasn't. It's because of the environment and our beliefs that happens. Now, again, if we can become this technology we're talking about, then that it all shifts and we change all our genetic, information to align with the truth.
Yes.
And I keep saying that, but it's just the truth.
Well, it keeps it simple. Well, the truth is the truth, period. It's not right or wrong, and it doesn't have to talk. It's there. It's the truth. It's like we're programmers. It's like we are, if we go back to the, to the, I don't know, the mechanical or the scientific, it's like we are the hardware, like you said. And then we're also the software maker and the programmer, and our information, which is really throwing a big, wild card into it, is moving so fast. It's like you're talking about this guy, that's basically healing with frequencies, And God, how many other modalities are there? And whether they get any press or not, they've got to be expanding as everything else is parallel to it. I mean, it's moving at warp speed. Are you seeing that in the 13 years plus, after that, in your research and in your practice? Are you seeing it just blowing up?
Oh yeah. I mean, the amount of changes people are experiencing now, you know, what was, you know, uh, psychotherapy was like, it still is. And, I respect every field and everything, but, some of them were taking so long. And now it feels like even maybe people who are doing psychotherapy are finding things are moving faster, or, I'm finding that it's just people are it's shifting so much quicker. But I know you know this, that the more we stay in this frequency and do the work ourselves, then the more that the people that come to us, the more that everything that
Yes.
is in our experience in our world also shifts.
Abundance in all ways, in many different ways. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, but what I and I brought this up over the last month or so with different people, and I've said, it seems like we should do shadow work. I'm not saying we don't now. I'm just saying there was some deep stuff that we did, and now things pop up, and it's a whole different process. It's almost like a maintenance. Like it hits you and you go, oh, that's what that is. And maybe you do project a little bit, or maybe you act out a little bit, but it's not as long and not as common or whatever. But it's like now with talking to you, I can picture, a faster track, which is just no matter where I'm at, no matter what's happening, basically go into my divinity, go into my sovereignty, go into that, that center of gravity within my bodies, and just plant myself there, because that is the ultimate tuning fork, I think, is from what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We become that tuning fork of the divinity. That's it. Like, just that sums it out.
Yeah. I've got to ask you, like, on a personal level. So as you have gone through your journey, has there been a mix of the spirit and the science? Or in other words, has it had a correlation? In other words, as you're doing these things, and let's just say the physical, on the scientific side, were you having correlating experiences in spiritual experiences or dimensional experiences, or meditation, or, anything like that? Or anything, noticing anything different that was less typical?
Well, I think for me, over the last 13, 14 years, it's really been a journey of, I've had a lot of trauma that's come my way.
Oh.
And as a result of it, it was almost like I was forced to become present, in every moment.
Yes.
It was like, they weren't those kind of traumas that were like one moment and then the next moment it's okay. It was over the years, that continuation of these things. And it feels like they're all gifts that allowed me to really, really tune into doing this work and be able to teach this work. And it feels to me that it was like I was being trained, I guess, to merge the science, and because my brain was like constantly in the science, because that's who I am. And every time something happens, I'm always thinking, well, what does this mean on a physical level? What is it like biologically? What's happening? And then how does it fit with all of this? And so as I was going through all that, I knew scientifically what's going on. And on a physical, on an emotional level, it was like a training wheel that was kind of had to be, it took years to get to it, to be, in a way that I could sort of work it and talk about it.
Yeah, I get that. And I think there's a lot of people in that same lane on the soul highway. And that is that, like you described, so the series of traumas, and then in that there was a parallel or a development of something specific that you're doing. I thought you were going to say a minute ago, directed or guided or ordered to do, but it's like, okay, I got to do Soulogy every day, 8 years, Like no matter what else. And then in the early years, there was lots of traumas, but there's something about you know, moving out of that space of those traumas and having a clearer vision and focus on what you're doing. Like you were saying, it's almost like you were put into this for a reason. And which brings me to this next thing, which is there's a lot of talk or awareness of stepping up now for these types of people that I can see from my chair where I sit in have very similar paths over the last few years. But there seems to be like, okay, I'd say all the work, but all that type of stuff, kind of like we talked about the shadow work a minute ago, is done. You've got a different frequency as these things come in now. Now let's get to work. It's time to step up. And I don't mean that in a bad way if you don't, but there's just like this energy of let's go to work. And that's why I've seen too in the community and here too, of, okay, what do we do? How do we do it? Let's plan it. And it's like, no. Just get up and do your stuff and be present. It's a whole different world now. Does that resonate at all? Or am I crazy?
Absolutely. I totally feel that, because especially in the last month or 2 months, there's been this almost up leveling of that, in that sense that it feels like there's no need to do that work, like you said. And it's more about what we talked about earlier, about recognizing when we're stepping into that fear, and when we know that it's almost like we're grounded in this now, in this new way. And it's recognizing that when the other stuff comes, this is what we can choose. It's about what do we choose in the moment. And as we choose that, the more of that we see. And I don't know about you, but it's like if I have a thought about something now, I have to be really vigilant, because it's almost like it will manifest quite quickly, whether it's a fear thought or another thought. You know, I have to be very vigilant now.
Yeah, I've noticed that too, and I've really noticed. We've been in a cabin over here for a few weeks, so and most of the last, several months we've spent together, which is a lot like being alone, because there's a lot of silence, solitude, contemplation, work, or that type of thing. But one of the things I noticed is the clarity that's coming in the moment, and I know I can't be the only one, because I talk to people all the time on the show, and that is like, was it you that said there's like a foot in both worlds? Somebody said it in one of the last couple of shows. But what I'm saying is like, it will come in and I get the thought like this: so-and-so is doing this, so this is happening. And then I hear, hey, knucklehead, no, this is happening because you think it's happening. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's not happening. And then I take a moment, take a breath, boom, I'm done. And I'm not saying I have it down pat, but I can recognize that it's happening collectively, that's that ability, or let's say collective neural pathway is available now if you want to take it and get off the bulldozer going through the old ones. But it's a very positive sign. To me, it's a sign, because so many of us for so long, and I know you've probably had to go through it. You did, I'm sure. You're crazy. What are you doing? You're not normal. It's your fault. What's wrong with you? And now we're at this point where there's some type of stabilization to what we might have called our sanity. And maybe it's our own recognition and awareness of our true nature, but it helps. And I can see it. It's in the moment. And I can't believe I even explained it like that, but
I'm smiling because now the situation for me is that, because if something huge is in my life, I'm still very present. And I, not like you said, it's still, still in the practice mode, but much more than I've ever been. And people around me will kind of go, are you okay? Like, you're not reacting. Are you okay?
Yes. See, that Morgan used to do that. And then I was never like offended by it, but I was a little bit like, cause I was more shadowed. But as time went on, then I started to do it. I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not upset? Why is everybody so sad? and you question yourself a little bit, like we said earlier, like, is something wrong with me? You know, I mean, am I becoming totally desensitized or what? But there is a loss of that false emotion, I guess, or the debilitating emotion, or emotion that we're giving power over to, and now it kind of works for us, you know. And you know, she actually says that too. Morgan talks about kind of like the journey and the evolvement of the empath, where we used to be an empath from a disempowered state to an empath using it in a powerful state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and that way we're not taking stuff on anymore. Where rather than that, we're actually being transformers.
I like that word.
Yeah.
I'm putting your I just Morgan just sent me a message, and I'm going to put up your offer here, and I'm going to put it in the comments, and it's also in the post. I'm going to put it in the beginning of the live. Go back and edit it, the body of the live. Is there anything you wanted to take us through? You mentioned something earlier. Is there anything?
So they'll have that in the free gift anyway, but I wanted to sort of take people through that. And we've done kind of a little bit where, you know, if I just get people to close their eyes and just get them to feel where their center, like what you said, the center of gravity is, and just get a sense. And for everybody, it may be different. It's not the same for all of us. So just get a center, sort of a sense of that. And then think about something that's bothering you at the moment, you know, whatever it is. It could be emotional, it could be physical, and give it a number. So maybe from 0 to 10, 10 being the highest, and 0 being nothing at all. And as you're sensing that, now notice I didn't say feel, I said sense. Because the minute we say feel, we bring in emotion, and emotion brings with it thoughts. And then that becomes another frequency. So when you're sensing, you're actually feeling with divinity. And that's a huge shift in the way that we can be these tuning forks. So just get a sense of where you feel that physical or emotional issue. And at the same time, you're feeling your center of gravity, wherever that is. And then as you're doing that, just notice your breath. And as you're breathing, become aware of the breath at the top of your nose, where your eyes, between your eyebrows. So you're breathing in and out. Just notice that. Just stay with that at the top of the nose, bridge at the top. Just a couple of breaths. And then tune back into the body. Feel that center of gravity, wherever that is. And from that place now, just look to see where that issue is from 0 to 10. And you'll notice you feel calmer. You feel like that issue may not be bothering you, maybe less. Either way is fine, and you can just continue with the process. But notice I didn't say stay with the, you know, that sensation in that, but we came from the frequency of the center of your gravity. So as we come from that, we're changing the frequency of what we're sensing.
Yeah, I like that. I like the shortcuts and the you know, the simple things. And because I find that so much of this stuff that on a personal level that I receive, it's simple. It's like sound bites. It's like, do this, don't do that. You'd be smart, or, you know, just really easy. But they're not easy because they take a lot of conscientious, you know, consistent maintenance. But again, like you said earlier, I mean, everything's changing. The ability to transform is no longer in question. The reality of instant transformation is a fact. I mean, it can be done, and the more of us that do it, the more people that will do it. because I guess there's a relationship. Now you study the DNA as a transmitter, really. I mean, in part of what you're saying, there is a connection, I guess, from your spirit scientific mind. I'm asking a question, really. Is there a connection to the DNA in those around you and everything around you? Does it have the ability to recognize and expand or align with something external?
Are you talking about my DNA aligning with the external? Or?
Anyone's DNA? As we are changing the frequency or the signal of our DNA, what happens around us? Because
So we know about the Heart Math Institute, which they've done a lot of research with the heart, and how when we get into what we were talking about and exactly the same process that we went through, it aligns us with that space, and that creates this field. And that field is a frequency. And so if we are coming from our thoughts of the fear of the future, then that sort of field gets short and contracted. And it has an impact on our biological, processes, of course. But when we're that way, it's like, when we go in, like you said, if you go into a room, you can sense things. It's with this field. But if we can be in that space, be in that presence, we have this expanded field, that's going to connect with other people's hearts, whether they're in the same room or not. And even here, it's like online, we're connecting with everyone who's listening and listening to the replay even, because it goes quantum, it goes beyond time and space. And so this is how we have an impact on everything and everyone.
Thank you. I have a question, another curiosity question. You mentioned Bruce Lipton and epigenetics. What have been the 2 or 3 biggest influences besides your connection to infinite intelligence? Because obviously you have that. But what have been 2 or 3 of the biggest influences that you've had in your evolution?
My evolution, my parents, because when I was growing up, they taught me meditation early on. And it was part of my growing up. And one of the things that we were always doing in the car was they would talk about sages and how the miraculous was happening with the sages in the past and how they created the miraculous. And that left a big impression on me. And I feel that the work that I'm doing right now, it really is a reflection of what we talked about as we were growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's I haven't met too many people on the show that had that type of environment growing up, but that's very impressive. And most of them that I can recall had kind of a physical, in other words, there was a history of that within their family lines. And I can think of a couple of them that were even like in spiritual, like spiritual leaders or practitioners. So that's interesting. Yeah. I know you've had to seen a lot change in these 14 or 15 years. What do you think is going to happen from here? Can anybody predict it? We talked about the DNA being physical and non-physical. We're physical and non-physical, but I mean, are we going to be creating things and seeing things and experiencing things that are just beyond our minds?
You know what my vision is? Have you read The Masters of the Far East?
Oh my God. It's an old book, isn't it? The Masters of the Far East. Yeah, I read that in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
feel that we're stepping into that realm where we can create the miraculous, and
like the adepts.
By being this way. And they were able to manifest just by thought alone, and they were able to move around with thought alone. And I feel that as more we get refined in the way that we are right now, being present, I feel that that's not far away. That's my personal take on it, because as soon as I read those books, that's what came to me, that we have all of those abilities inside of us, and we're stepping into that if we are willing to. It's a choice. It's not that it's not available.
Well, something's happening, because this happens a lot. And see, I had another question kind of over here in that one, and you just answered that one. I hadn't answered the other one, because I was going to say, basically, do you see the world, or reframe the question, do you see the world, this being a unique situation where we could have a whole world of those people, you know? And you really just answered that. But you're right. And you know, another thing I remember too, when you said that, because I read those books in the 80s, but I found another guy. He was an English guy named Paul Brunton, and he was a mystic. He was a Caucasian guy, but he was a mystic, and he lived with the yogis and the fakers and many other, you know, around the world. But he talked about, or he had an article in one of his books, and it was published in a British newspaper, and it was almost 1890. I remember that. But they had found, somewhere around the Himalayas, they had found a little, you know, group, like say 10, 12 adepts that would come down into this small town. He spent some time with them, and they were like 400 or 500 years old, and they would come down, and that's what they would do. You know, they would do this miraculous, you know, they'd come down to eat, or they'd come down to do this or that, and whatever they needed would appear. So it's not that far gone from us, you know. I mean, if it's that close to us in the past, it's got to be real close to us in the future, because of the amount of information and expansion that we've all had.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
so I think
it's always go ahead.
It's exciting, I think.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. It's absolutely unknown. And that's a macrocosm of everything we run, the microcosms we run through in our life every day as we navigate it. Because I think another thing that we're finding, if you take the spirits and the science and everything out of it, it's, you know, the same equation. Are you going to walk through this door? Are you not? You know what I mean? And if you don't walk through the door, which may be facing a fear or this or that, you are subject to being disempowered by what you said, death. The belief in the frequency of death, you know, which covers, you know, it's a totally different experience when you're not afraid of it. But I really want to thank you. It's such a joy. I can't believe it's my fault. I should have taken a little bit more of a, you know, initiative and reached out to you, but I'm glad Morgan did. And I'd love to get together with you again soon and get an update, because I know things are going to change drastically in the next few weeks as we go into 2020. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we sign off? Anything you had to announce or anything?
I think we're good. Just people can use the freebie, and as they do, they'll be able to step into that space. And my true gift to everyone is that we all have the presence within us that can transform this world, can transform us, can transform ourselves, can transform our way of living. And if we can step into that, we choose, like you say, then we're there.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to that party. I'll see you there. You take care until the next time.
Thank
the best
you,
to you and yours. All
Thank you.
blessings.
Okay.
Bye-bye.